St. Kilda, outpost of the Western Ocean. To prepare a shared all-day breakfast sandwich and an early start with C. Harris, £260 puts you in the expert care of skipper Ian Angus and James in a fast boat. Thanks to their recommendation to change our departure window, the 50 or so miles, 46 nautical miles, of open sea to St. Kilda from Leverburgh and the Outer Hebrides is calm today. St. Kilda is the far western edge of Scotland. Only a bare rock, the aptly named Rock All, remains further out as the farthest crumb of Scotland. And then, after a couple of hours of sea and sky, Borre looms out of the mists before we spot Hirta and then Doon lurking beside her, like Skull Island, but the giants here are cliffs and stacks. And then we're here. Sue from the National Trust for Scotland makes us welcome and explains the rules and the precautions regarding avian flu, which has been taking a toll on the seabirds. The boat will sit in Village Bay for 5 hours. The main island of the St. Kilda archipelago is Hirta, and this was the home to the St. Kildans, the Hiartach. Despite its remoteness from Harris, it has a marked Hebridean feel in the smell of the peaty earth and of the aroma of sheep in the air. On the day I was there, the soft air was that of a calm, humid day anywhere in the Hebrides. The unique soy sheep are an ancient breed who, along with the oversized St. Kilda mice, are the last notable land-based year-round residents. The lineage of the soy sheep goes back to the early domestication of the Bronze Age. Brought here by the Vikings, they take the harsh conditions in their dainty stride. They need little attention, shedding their own fleeces, so not even shearing is required. The first place to check out is the village. That this stark set of volcanic rocks sticking out of the seas on the edge of the continental shelf should ever have been a natural home to anyone, let alone generations of people, is beyond intuition. Yet they were here from at least 4000 BC. St. Kilda, for me, like so many others, has been a long-standing, almost lifelong interest and fascination. St. Kilda is surely from another world, a dream or a fantasy, and yet here it is, solid rock and very much the case. Aye, the uncanny domesticity of the street is juxtaposed against the wildest conditions endured by any peoples of an already rugged Scotland. The folk evacuated from here in 1930, less than a century ago, were perhaps the last European hunter-gatherers. Not nomadic and admittedly capable of not insignificant farming, their lifestyle nonetheless relied emphatically upon climbing the crags for birds and their eggs, with an expertise that understood both the fallow and the harvest of each species' life cycle, here on the sea-sprayed and wind-blasted utter edge of Europe. So surely in essence, a hunter-gatherer lifestyle. The street, giving the place a touchstone of urban familiarity, serves to cast the otherworldliness of their lifestyle into the sharpest relief. The death-defying cragsmanship that saw St. Kildans risk their lives on the dizzying stacks and cliffs to eke meagre survival is a wonder brought forcefully and forcibly home. The exhibition centre is inside one of the houses. It all makes it clear just how tough these folk really were. Who can truly imagine the reality of the lives here in this well-known street for these people who climbed hundreds of feet for fulmar and other seabirds to eat by the light of fishy-smelling oil lamps? Older black houses are interspersed with later buildings. The First World War gun came a little late to the party, 1919, and is yet to be fired at German shipping. And everywhere is scattered with Clichin. I knew about these, but I wasn't prepared for the shotgun peppered dispersal. From a distance, the hillside reminds me of blobs of gum on the pavement, with huge numbers of them seemingly on every available site. Not only are they all over and around the village, but they reach high and thick up the side of the two steep hills, Connacher and Oshival, which guard the village. These clean were a genius invention for drying and keeping dry in a harsh rain and sea-swept climate meat, seabirds, hay and peat for fuel. They purposefully left gaps for drafts in the side walls which allow shelter but with the benefit of a drying wind. The large single top slab keeps them waterproof, aided by turf laid upon it, which both holds and deflects the winter storm rain, allowing them to repel the overwhelming deluge that will surely come. And again, they really are everywhere. It almost suggests a sense of OCD, but then you'd be pretty focused if you were tasked with surviving a winter here. They even run in two bold lines right up to the top of the gap, or, as known always to the Gaelic-speaking natives, Berach na Heike, the cutting web. Interesting that English focuses on the gap between Connacher and Oshival, while Gaelic cites that which actually connects them. The thin, fine nature of the hill is perhaps suggesting razor, berach, while Eige is perhaps a web, as in the web feet of a gannet, between the claws or toes, Oshival and Connacher. Connacher, 1,569 feet high. Connacher, Oshival, Gaelic and Norse. It is fascinating how the deep heritage of these islands is suggested by the ancient use of both the Gaelic and the Norse language influence on it. Connacher seems Gaelic, while Oshival is Norse for what it is, East Hill. St.Kilda may be a tiny archipelago, but it certainly knows how to do comparative scale. Hirta, indeed all of St.Kilda, defies the senses. It is at once both compact and yet also huge. A well-made cleat survives even up here at the top of the gap. 1,000-foot cliffs plummet to the deep. Borere beckons for later. The air is, as you would expect, fresh and clean, as the lichen attests. From Village Bay, the tops of Oshival, the Gap and Connacher, that topography reminds me of an orange segment, a gentle rounded climb up the inside of a crescent before an unmitigated plummet to the sea. Although it's actually quite steep. Back down again, and, as a reminder of antiquity, here, just behind the street, is the Earth House. It is a souterrain similar to Castle Law on the edge of Edinburgh, at once again both surprising and familiar. In other contexts, both Hirta and indeed Castle Law could be described as Pictish, which souterrains usually, but not quite always, are. But location here, as at Castle Law, casts doubt on our categories. And the kirk was, unsurprisingly, the centrehold of their lives here on the precipitous edge of human existence. As with so many Scots kirks, the stark simplicity belies an unfettered strength of faith that is satisfied without frippery. The schoolroom, an anteroom just off the kirk, and a chart of Canada, appropriately enough where an emigrant, who must have sat here long and often, Donald John Gillis, would spend the bulk of his many years in the ministry of God. And then it's goodbye to Hirta. Now the stacks of Lee and Armon and Borere. And there is nothing that can prepare you for the castellation of cliffs and crags that soar supreme from the misty Atlantic swell. The birds, though depleted at this time in 2023 by avian flu, still command the air and the ledges from which they launch themselves. Stack Lee like a giant breaching shark. Borere. Stack an Armon. Hirta now 4 to 5 miles distant. Borere. Stackenarman, where 3 men and 8 boys survived while marooned for 8 months from August 1727 to the following May over a ferocious Atlantic winter when smallpox had all but wiped out the rest of the St. Kildans, including those who would have come for them after a matter of days. Quite how they survived the best part, or indeed the worst part, of a year on this rock is beyond my imagination. It's not really possible to overstate the drama of colossal crags soaring up from the sea. The cliffs of St. Kilda are home to an estimated 1 million seabirds that include puffin and fulmar, gannet, shearwater, petrel, kittiwake and shags. The caves of Borere. Now I think this looks like a boar's head, which I think is probably how it got its name. I don't know if that's right, but that's my theory anyway. The North Sea View navigation system worked from sea features that could be seen from a boat, and how they were seen from a boat. Ears and snout. As we had first approached this morning, Borere had looked to me for all the world like the approach on Skull Island from King Kong. Swell and soar. St. Kilda has changed me. She is a humbling influence, unthinkable bravery in a world of relative isolation. Lives of pure extremes, stark, terrifying, yet innocent of the wider world, a closed system where all but the most private deceits are so pointless as to not exist. Catching fulmar, both eggs and birds, was a central staple of life. A life lived on the edge of Scotland, the edge of the continent, the edge of the cliff, the edge of survival, the edge of sustainability, the edge of the world. No wonder that as the 20th century began, a growing knowledge of life elsewhere and, by comparison, the hardships of their own world did, in gradual yet steady increments, draw away the population to the point of loss of critical mass. What this says about the comparative nature of human psychology is interesting, and, as a story from a society of such fervent Christianity, the analogy with the Garden of Eden is irresistible, albeit with the strong suspicion that Adam's former life was somewhat cushier. By 1930, the prospect of surviving another winter became so precarious that those who had thus far remained opted for permanent evacuation to the mainland. But what a tough, and I would say noble people they had been. You wouldn't mess. The men did not live, in general, long lives. One can imagine age creeping up on a man's pride as he reached for one last egg, perhaps with the fulmar spitting out its stinking evil ejaculation of oil at him. He recoils, but a tired muscle fails him. His grip is lost as he goes over. A euphemism for all human demise on St. Kilda, and even in the wider Gaelic world. But here, going over has resonance as a phrase which is given extra power by an all too familiar and usual end. The knowledge, or the perception rather, that there was a better life tarnished the steel-like quality from their resolve. The numbers of fit and able young cragsmen depleted by the lure of a way, and slowly that critical mass of numbers needed to survive in this precarious life dwindled. Was the life away actually better? No anthropologist or psychologist can determine this now. Andy McFarlane, a man from Mull who worked with evacuated St. Kildas when they were, absurdly for a folk who'd never hitherto seen a tree, sent to work on the forestry at Loch Allen, told a recent podcast that they had no idea of the 8 to 5 as a working day, or 12 till 1 lunch break. They were completely lost. Certainly at first they were, in their new world. And now to home. And leaving, I could only stare as St. Kilda recessed back into the depths of my mind. Had I conjured all this? I felt, as I processed that which disappeared, as if I was perhaps the less wise brother of Al-Mustafa, watching all this that was learned on Orphalese melt into my far horizon. Was that I who spoke? The visit was defined by contrast of the familiar in thought with the reality of experience. Some of that was expected, but other bits required abrupt recalibration. Very humbling, but also thoughts of cragsmen whose unthinkable courage and prowess enabled heroic acts of survival which were simultaneously both everyday and beyond legend.